The next section of this DVD is called Trims. There are all kinds of wonderful trims available and that you can make to embellish your clothing. This is the Spinster. It's a wonderful little tool. This is kind of like a drill, and what it does is that it twists or plies threads or yarns into a fatter yarn. So I have two different yarns here, one with metallic and one without. Neither one of them are very fat on their own. So what I'm going to do is create a little slip knot here at the end onto which I hook them, and then, having attached it to a doorknob or something handy, you stand away from it and you just start twisting. So what that's doing is twisting or plying, P-L-Y, the yarns into a larger yarn. Okay, so you can do that as tight as you want. But then what the fun thing to do, and to make it twice as fat, is you grab it in the middle, and then they'll twist together yet again. It really takes two people to do this, but they'll just automatically twist. See that? Yielding a cord like this. So now I could couch that cord on the surface of the fabric. I could lay it along the edge and couch it down as a fake piping. But I could also make real piping. I could give it a lip that gets stitched into the seam allowances by making use of this wonderful lightweight stuff called Seams Great. I used miles of this before I invested in a serger. So what you're going to do is just lay this next to this really lightweight nylon tricot and zigzag it on with monofilament thread. So then if you do that, you have like a piping attached to a lip that then you could insert within a seam. So that is Spinster. You can also make your own trim if you know the simple skills of crocheting and knitting. So with this super duper big, let's see what size is this? 18, 19, 15 millimeter crochet hook. I simply took a green strand and a gray strand of wool yarn, bulky wool yarn, and crocheted a chain, which then I laid down on the edge of this creative sweatshirt jacket, straight stitched through the middle with monofilament thread, and that's my trim. So if you can't find trim that you like, that matches, make your own by crocheting or knitting. Way back in Brownies, I learned how to knit and purl. So that's really what I did on this jacket. I simply took straight cut strips of cotton fabric and sandwiched with it just one layer of this hairy yarn and knit them on big knitting needles. These are size 35. Big equals fast. So I just knit some big rectangles and attached it to the cuffs and straight around the neckline for a collar. Quick, easy, fun TV work embellishment. And do you remember earlier where we actually used the selvage of the fabric as trim? Well, sometimes the selvage has its own quality to it. It's ruffly, and so when I was creating this long black skirt, this was the ruffly selvage on the fabric itself. So I just decided to gather it, make use of that selvage as the finished edge of this ruffle. So I have a very simple hem to this skirt. Ideas are out there just for the taking. Creativity is not dreaming it up to begin with. It's just seeing an idea and making it work for you, interpreting it just a little bit differently. At the end of last Christmas season, I saw this Christmas stocking in a boutique, and what caught my eye was the little loops of grosgrain ribbon simply inserted within the seam allowance. So I thought to myself, what a cool little trim. So when I was making this sweatshirt jacket, I just made loops of fabric and inserted them in the edge for a similar trim. Quick and easy, not original, but definitely a nice embellishment. And then of course you can just ravel fabric like we've shown you before. I wanted to show you some more samples, however. Just a straight strip of fabric. I stitched it to the wrong side of the garment, pulled it around to the right side, couched down a thread, and then pulled out yarns to create the raveled effect here. And then same thing on the collar. I cut it out straight grain so that I could ravel the edge. And I stopped the raveling process by either zigzagging or couching down a thread. Then it's not going to ravel any further. So I've done that a lot over the years. Here's a very old jacket. This is the Mission jacket from Sewing Workshop. You see there's no couching here, but there's just a straight stitch along that edge to keep it from raveling any further. Any loosely woven wool or silk will ravel very nicely. Here's another jacket. This is the retro jacket from Los Hince. This one didn't start out with the black accent on it. I had gold buttons on it instead of the black. But then when I decided I wanted to wear it with black pants, I added the black trim and the black buttons. And in this case, I had actually taken a strip of straight fabric, inserted it between the jacket and the collar, the facing, stitched it, and then pulled that out. So it was really like a piping, which then I pulled the threads out of after I was done. So fringe. Fringe is fun, whether it's bias and doesn't ravel, or straight grain and you have raveled it to start with. This is a home decorating fringe. You would find it on pillows. It's frequently used on purses, or at least I sell it for that. You see how it comes. People just don't believe that this turns into this really furry, wild, crazy edging. It has an edge that's controlled, that's the heading of the fringe, and then it has 1, 2, 3 rows of a chain stitch which controls that fringe. So if I were going to stitch this on the edge of the jacket, as I have done here, I bound the edge and then I put on this black. I put it on like this before I pull the threads out. If you do it by pulling the threads out first, you will have a hard time stitching it on. So you stitch it on, and it's going to get so furry that it doesn't really matter whether you stitch it this way or this way. It's not going to matter. You stitch it on, and then one end or the other, just like a sack of potatoes or dog food or something that's closed with a chain stitch, you pull on the chain stitch and then it will unravel. So that's how that works. This is not cheap. It's $7.95 a yard as of right now. So it can mount up pretty quickly. I had the idea of sewing it in rows. So this was a very simple thing to do. You can see from the inside here, I really just stitched rows of it on 1 1/4 inches apart so that it looks like just a cape effect. However, as I was saying, it can